I don't know how many of you out there are going to know this or not, so I'll just start from the beginning. In boxing, there are generally three styles, or there are three general styles that a person will almost always gravitate towards one of them more than the other two. And that is the obvious one that everybody knows is the pressure fighter. The guy who wants to be in the pocket and keep going, right? And keep you on defense. That's where he likes it. And then a lot of people know about the slugger that just punches big shots, whether it's down the pipe or around the sides, and they just wing them, and they don't really chase, but they kind of just slowly walk after you, and once you're in range, just unload. And then there's the outboxers, which I like that term because it's kind of a double meaning and they're both accurate. So for one, they're trying to stay on the outside, outboxer. The other is that they're focusing more on technical refinement and developing counters and being able to read people long game. You know, and they're trying to avoid people and pick them apart slowly and avoid damage themselves, right? Now, some of you may have already heard the fact that, in general, when these three styles are pure and exemplified by a person, they have a rock, paper, scissors function. So the pressure fighter has the energy, consistency, and movement that they can eventually hunt down the outfighter who's trying to be evasive, because the back foot, it's a little harder. You know, try it out and you'll see. It takes a lot more energy and focus, whereas the pressure fighter can just kind of keep coming in. And then the outboxer will generally beat the slugger by just avoiding them altogether and only hitting them now and then without being tagged back because of speed, timing, and footwork and range. You know, because the slugger's waiting for them to get in that range, and so, you know, the outboxer, you know, triggers that move, and then once they're overextended, bam. You know, so they do that kind of stuff. Or if the slugger's coming at them, you know, do those kinds of moves, where it's kind of like that matrix roll, half pass dodge, whatever. So, and then the fucking the slugger, you know, generally beats the pressure fighter because the pressure fighter is trying to focus on overwhelming with speed, whereas the slugger is just going to eat those shots and launch bigger bombs back. So, you know, because they're generally going to be stronger. Like, people gravitate towards these. I'm talking about when they're exemplified in their purest form, right? So, slugger would be like a big, strong, heavy guy that can't move very fast, so he doesn't have a choice. Pressure fighter would be the guy who's fairly fast on the front foot and has a lot of hip and head movement, and they're fast with the hands. And then an outboxer would be usually a leaner, taller person who has a lot of springiness, who can hop back a little quicker and longer, you know, and usually they have longer arms, so they're able to use counter shots at a tighter angle, but still be a relatively similar distance. So you see how they're all rock, paper, scissors. But something that I haven't heard anyone talk about when it comes to these is that while you can train all of them, and you should probably, they don't actually, like, their dichotomies don't actually function on a circular way that the rock, paper, scissors does, in this sense, like in the terms of development and a person's potential. For the most part, a person who is naturally an outboxer like me, especially when I was 130 pounds, I didn't have any choice to be a slugger. So yeah, I could still do pressure fighting in the pocket, but I couldn't do power shots and eating shots. It wasn't my choice. It was out of my control. And similarly, people on the other end, people who are naturally sluggers, who are naturally slow and naturally strong, tend to not be very fast on the back foot. They tend to, you know, not be able to cover distance and attack at a greater distance, and they're generally not as refined. You know, so if they wanted to do that, it would be harder for them. But now someone who's naturally a pressure fighter can more or less just choose by exercise and diet which way they want to go. You know, like, so even if you're like, whether you're 5'6" or 6'2", if you're a pressure fighter, naturally, and that's just where you feel at home, you can probably train the other two and combine them all better than someone who starts on one extreme or the other. Now, it doesn't mean there's not exceptions, and there are people who do it. Like there was that one huge dude doing Taekwondo spin kicks at like 300 pounds or something. But he's not the rule. When we talk about training and self-defense, like, especially if you're not a master yet, you just need to be learning what's likely, what's probable, because you don't want to prepare for the thing you're never going to face against anyways. It's a waste of time. So yeah, and so now you kind of see how even though they work in a circle in terms of beating each other at their highest forms, it's not exactly a fair skew in terms of what you can physically produce from your starting point. You know, me personally, it's taken years of not exercising, having even shadow boxed up until a couple months ago for like 3 years. I had still been shadow boxing and kind of punching stuff, but no gear, no real sparring for 6 years, and so that part wasn't intentional, but the last 3 years was. And I've been trying to put on weight because I want to be strong enough that I can potentially handle any style or any variation or combination of them I come up against, or at least survive, So, yeah, if I had been naturally a pressure fighter, I could have easily bulked up to become a slugger while getting that cut explosiveness to become an outfighter, at least a little bit. Now people who are naturally outfighters are probably going to be the best outfighters. People who are naturally sluggers are probably going to be the best sluggers. And the people who are naturally pressure fighters, at least a percentage of them, I don't know how many, are going to be the best all-rounded, at least usually at the highest level. And I think we've seen that. We've seen a lot of people do Taekwondo and karate and stuff like that for years. They translate it to MMA. It works for a long time. Then they get caught, sometimes by the pressure fighter, or sometimes by the slugger, because they were so focused on their one thing, And so me, being naturally bouncy and light and being able to move around, I've been training myself to be more grounded. This is actually the first time, this couple months, I've never trained in quite this deep of a stance before. At least not full on, like, using force and actually trying to, like, get a physical resistance workout going during my training to that extent, Before, it had always just been, like, light and soft, and maybe I'd practice moves and go them hard, but I wouldn't really use them hard, and I wasn't really planted. Even, because like in my Systema training, I would be able to not be planted, and so I got used to not being planted, because that, Taekwondo, some other stuff. But with boxing, I really got to get down on this, So yeah, and I've mentioned all this, mostly for education, obviously, like 90%, but also a little tidbit I wanted to throw in there. I'm working on a combination of boxing and Wing Chun. And I'm going to be training that for at least a few more months, and hopefully before the end of this year, I'm going to try it at Street Beefs, the Washington location. Yeah, thanks for the watch, guys. Catch you later. Like and subscribe.